morning, everyone. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for inviting me to give this presentation. I know we must be all very hungry, but I hope you bear with me with a couple of minutes. So today I will zoom out a bit, and I will talk about three aspects that we believe are affecting either directly or indirectly the acceleration of CCS. And if I still have some time, I will talk about how we are trying to tackle these issues at the GSB. So throughout history, we have seen new technologies come and go, and old technologies go. And while CCS technologies are not exactly new, we have been trying to deploy them at a commercial scale for over 2 decades. And we have made a lot of progress along the way, but unfortunately, this progress is not going fast enough. We think there are two important reasons to explain this, or at least to explain why CCS is so hard to deploy compared to other technologies. The first one is that CCS was created with a purpose related to a collective good, something that concerns all of us, such as reducing CO2 emissions or fighting climate change. And the second one is that CCS technologies don't bring an immediate and not a tangible benefit. So the problem with that is that our society and the actors in it are not designed or educated to think very long term. So because of that, they won't do, support, believe, or invest in something that doesn't bring them a profit or a direct benefit in their lifetime or in a short-term benefit. So what I mean here with it is not only about CCS, is that sometimes as scientists, as geologists, we are very focused on working on the technical aspects of CCS, on the geological aspects of CCS, and we forget that we can also make progress by focusing on other aspects of our society that might be affecting this deployment, and that we could reach our goal as well if we take a step back and look other ways. So in this figure, you can see a very simple representation of society and how three aspects that I will be addressing today influence each other, those being the management of the subsurface uses, the actors and institutions, and the public opinion. So it is clear that these aspects already influence each other constantly, but unfortunately, this interaction is somewhat often very complex. There's no will for collaboration, so that results in a very distant and noisy interaction. So to explain this, why this is problematic, I will give you an example. So imagine a situation where two companies come to the competent authority around the same time to obtain permits on overlapping areas. The first company needs a storage permit to inject CO2 coming from, let's say, a cement plant nearby, and the second company needs a deep geothermal energy production permit to use the warm water to heat the hospital and a nearby village. I think both projects could support the energy transition. Both projects support the climate targets. But now let's take a second and think about the most likely outcome of this situation, considering how the system and society works today. That means considering invested interests, political agendas, public opinion, employment impact, economic impact, and so on. Let's also remember that most authorities work under the first come, first serve approach, and they often don't have an actual framework to manage the subsurface in a sustainable or efficient way. So having considered all of that, I think we can all see it happening that the competent authority grants the permits to the deep geothermal project and says, for example, hey, I know there's this brewery with a huge shortage of CO2, why don't you divert some of that CO2 to this brewery? And then it's a win-win situation, right? But in the meantime, onshore storage is still not being deployed, and huge amounts of CO2 are still not being permanently stored. So for this situation, the first critical aspect are the actors and the institutions. Actors of any nature that are involved in steering the outcome in one way or the other. Whether we like it or not, there is a game of influencers being played in situations like this. So we need to know, what are their priorities? Do they understand the benefits of developing a storage site? Do they understand the consequences of not doing so? Maybe are they willing to find alternative outcomes of this situation that might not be very obvious or that might take extra effort but might support both subsurface uses? To answer these questions, we believe it's not only done about informing them and educating them on CCS, but also about promoting collaboration, about working around the issue or the situation, understand the bigger picture and what that represents for the future. So how can we change their attitudes? A good framework for the sustainable management of the subsurface could be a good tool to help change the attitudes of some of these actors. The problem is that there is no such framework. In fact, until now, it is not clear yet what sustainable management of the subsurface entails when there are multiple subsurface uses taking place and there are some other potential subsurface uses being considered. So, do we understand the interferences and the impacts of one or more subsurface uses operating in the same area? How do we give priority to one permit or the other when we are confronted with this situation? How do we manage this subsurface in an efficient way while still optimizing all its potential uses? So, if the actors are presented with this situation and they have a framework available to them to understand better this situation, I think we can change this outcome into a portfolio of multiple opportunities, alternative opportunities. So, for example, why don't we grant the storage permits and assess the possibility of having the deep geothermal energy project in an area a bit further away? Have they verified the geological conditions to move the field? Or, for example, why don't we grant the storage permits and produce shallow geothermal instead? Or, better yet, why don't we take a look at the original situation and see if we can make everything happen? Why don't we grant the storage permit and see if we can, for example, pump the water from the saline aquifer to produce a deep geothermal energy and then repressurize the reservoir by injecting the CO2, and maybe there's still some opportunity to divert some of that CO2 to this brewery in CO2 shortage. So these are only 3 scenarios that I came up with, but I'm sure there are more if we are willing to cooperate. So the third and final critical aspect of a situation like this is the public opinion. So I think history and experience have shown us that social engagement cannot be ignored and that it should take place early. We also know that public opinion of onshore storage cannot be handled the same way as public opinion of offshore storage. But we think that there might be some value in taking a look at public opinion of other subsurface uses, such as geothermal energy or underground gas, natural gas storage, and maybe draw some useful lessons from there. Another important aspect is that sometimes we are very focused on compiling this information that is very clear and very well thought, but sometimes the bigger question is how to give this information and when. So coming back to the final figure, we believe that there's still some transitions that we must undergo at every level of our society to speed up this process, to accelerate CCS, And these transitions are already taking place, but there's still plenty of work in other aspects that we could be doing to speed up this process and convert or transform this noisy, distant relationship into a more close and in sync relationship. I don't know if I still have some time to explain at GSB, so we firmly believe that by promoting collaboration, we can reach this goal, or we can aid this goal. So you can see here some of our project proposals that we are preparing, have been preparing for some time already. And they are addressing these aspects that I discussed with you today. So the PhD and the focus project proposal address the Belgian society, different aspects of the Belgian society in regards to the past, present, and future of CCS in Belgium. The Grays and Diamonds project proposals are trying to create a sustainable management of the geological resources framework that is interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and supports policy making and decision making. And the Purpose project proposal tries to understand how public opinion of onshore storage shapes at a very early stage, meaning before there's any plans in place. So yeah, just to come back to this figure, hopefully by sometimes stepping out of our comfort zone as geologists and as scientists, we can learn to cooperate more and to look at the bigger picture and maybe reach this goal. Thank you.